It's official. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban are getting divorced. Their court papers now laid bare. There are also reports Urban is already seeing someone else.
The announcement caught many off guard. Nicole Kidman has formally filed for divorce from Keith Urban after 19 years of marriage.
Between Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman, married for 19 years.
She cited irreconcilable differences in court papers submitted in Davidson County, Tennessee, marking September 30th, 2025 as their separation date. That day would close a chapter that began more than a decade and a half ago, when two Australians, one rising in Hollywood, another in country music, charted a life together across continents, careers, and shared dreams. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. Their relationship had always held an aura of fairy tale promise. They first met in January 2005 at a G-Day USA gala in Los Angeles, where they connected amid the buzz of cultural diplomacy and celebrity. But the spark, as is often the case with such stories, wasn't instantaneous. Kidman has recounted how Urban waited months before eventually calling her, and how, by her 38th birthday, she knew she had found her person. By May 2006, they were engaged, and on June 25th of that year, they exchanged vows in Sydney. The years that followed saw them entwined in triumph, turbulence, partnership, and growth, but as the recent filing underscores, even the strongest of unions can fracture under the weight of time. The early years of their marriage confronted real pressure. Just months after tying the knot, Urban entered rehab to address alcohol dependence, working through that struggle with Kidman by his side. Over time, Kidman and Urban cultivated a reputation not just as celebrity spouses, but as a team. Kidman spoke of us as something to be actively nurtured, asking in interviews, "Does this work for us?" Their love seemed to thrive through transitions, relocation to Nashville, the arrival of two daughters, Sunday Rose in 2008, and Faith Margaret via surrogate in 2010, and the constant imbalances forced by two high-profile, hard-driving careers. But in more recent years, observers and insiders quietly sensed fissures forming, small tensions, curiously muted praise, moments of private dissonance that seldom made headlines until now. Though the public learned of the separation only in late September, those close to the couple say the rift had been brewing for months. According to multiple reports, the two began living separately in early summer 2025. Urban quietly moved into his own residence, a symbolic turning point, hinting at a rupture that was already taking shape. Meanwhile, Kidman was reportedly resistant to the separation, fighting to salvage what remained of the bond. Though the reasons for their split are known publicly only in the broadest strokes, clues from court filings and media reports offer a more textured view. The declaration of irreconcilable differences is a standard legal phrasing for no-fault divorces, but embedded within their legal documents lies a more precise framework. Kidman sought to be the primary residential parent for their daughters, proposing they spend 306 days a year with her and only 59 with Urban. Interestingly, both parties had already signed off on a parenting plan months prior to the filing, suggesting that for all the drama, a great deal of planning and negotiation had already occurred behind closed doors. In the same documents, Kidman and Urban laid out terms for asset division, insisting neither would be awarded spousal support. These filings also exposed the extent to which each understood the legal stakes. They disclosed sources of income and financial standing, likely preparing for a more complex separation than many assumed. The emotional contours of this divorce are already playing out in leaks, rumors, and one insider claim. Sources close to the conflict have suggested that Urban moved on with another woman, hinting at betrayal. And a fracture not purely rooted in growing apart, Kidman is said to feel both hurt and betrayed, an acquiescence to reality after what she tried hard to prevent. Yet nothing has been definitively substantiated. These remain speculative, perhaps emotional salves in a deeply private heartbreak. In the weeks surrounding the filing, appearances and absences became loaded with significance. Kidman made a public comeback just days after submitting the divorce petition, attending the Amfar Gala in Dallas and delivering a tribute to Taylor Sheridan. That same day, she and her sister Antonia were spotted hiking in Nashville, seemingly leaning on family as she steadied herself in public. Her eldest daughter, Sunday Rose, was simultaneously overseas at Paris Fashion Week, modeling in Dior. Her absence, deepening the narrative of a family stretching across distance. Urban, on the other hand, appeared conspicuously without his wedding ring at a recent performance, and was seen altering lyrics in a song once inspired by his wife. He also excluded The Fighter, a song about Kidman, from that night's setlist, and replaced a reference to her in another track. Whether these are subtle signals of a changed heart or strategic public distancing, fans and press are already reading them as emblematic of a deeper rupture. This separation is not the first time either has confronted the existential weight of heartbreak. Kidman's previous marriage, to Tom Cruise in the 1990s, was a high-profile union that ended in public upheaval. Yet her relationship with Urban always seemed like a second act with more control, more foundation. Their partnership weathered personal challenges. Urban's previous addiction battles, Kidman's intensive acting schedules, lofty expectations from fans who saw them as a Hollywood power couple. Over time, though, small fractures quietly aggregated. In recent years, Urban's praise for Kidman became less effusive. He is reported to have avoided public declarations that he had once freely given. Some insiders say that in the final months, he began to disengage emotionally, pulling back in ways that were not at first dramatic, but gradually felt unbridgeable. From the outside, it is tempting to parse the divorce as a story of ambition versus intimacy, of performance versus authenticity, or even gendered tensions between a high-achieving actress and a celebrity musician whose identity had to walk both public and private lines. Kidman's recent choices, such as taking on provocative film roles connected with the erotic, are being speculated as stress tests for the marriage, things that perhaps Urban balked at publicly supporting. Yet to reduce their separation to creative conflicts or to individual misstep would be to oversimplify the worn machinery of long-term relationships. If there is an arc to this story, it has always been one of persistence. Even at the cusp of separation, Kidman is said to have worked against it, reluctant to let go. The efforts to draft and sign a parenting plan in advance, to negotiate custody, to decide on asset division, it suggests a separation that, while emotionally shattering, has been undertaken with deliberation. Their daughters, now ages 17 and 14, sit at the heart of the stakes. Their living situation, schooling, emotional stability, all must now be recalibrated. Kidman has requested primary physical custody, which may be more than symbolic. It anchors the new structure of their lives. One can only imagine the emotional toll on two public figures forced into private reckonings. Kidman, ever the actress used to control and transformation, now steps into a new role. A mother navigating dissolution, entirely under public scrutiny. Urban, whose career is built on performance, must now perform his vulnerability off stage, if only in gestures and glances that hint at the sorrow beneath the veneer. Neither is likely to emerge from this unscathed, because divorce is not merely a legal separation, but an unraveling of shared identity and future expectations. Yet amid the pain, there is also the possibility of onwardness. In her brief public outing after filing, Kidman appeared composed, centering her speech on community and shared humanity. She will need to lean on her family and herself. Her sister's support was already evident. In the weeks ahead, their daughters will have to navigate loyalty, grief, and shifting routines. Meanwhile, Urban will face the challenge of redefining his role. Still father, no longer husband. The finality of legal separation may still lie ahead, but emotionally, the divide already speaks. Once the phrase irreconcilable differences was invoked, both had to confront that some disparities cannot be bridged by will or love alone. Even the grandest love stories sometimes reach an endpoint, not because the love died, but because the architecture around it no longer holds. The unraveling of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage, after nearly 2 decades of what seemed to be stability and devotion, has left the public stunned. But those who understand the nature of long relationships between two intensely driven individuals can recognize the quiet inevitability in such a dissolution. It is never the grand gestures that end a marriage. It is the gradual erosion of connection, the slow drift between two people who once promised each other the world. For years, Kidman and Urban managed to balance the precarious scales of fame, family, and individuality. Yet time, relentless, impartial, often reshapes even the most resilient unions. when a relationship that has endured nearly half a lifetime begins to fray. The unraveling is not explosive, but melancholic, like a slow fade at the end of a song that once played loudly and beautifully. Their life together had been marked by a curious duality, an existence both intensely public and fiercely private. They lived under the constant hum of cameras and commentary, yet maintained a reputation for discretion, even secrecy. Interviews were rare, and when they did occur, both spoke about each other in poetic but careful terms. Kidman often described their love as a sanctuary, something untouched by the noise of the outside world. Urban, in turn, would refer to his wife as his life partner and center. Their images projected warmth and steadiness, their red carpet appearances brimming with unspoken affection. Behind those photographs, however, were the realities of separate careers demanding constant travel, long periods of absence, and the quiet, emotional taxation of lives lived half apart. Kidman's world is cinematic, deeply introspective, filled with scripts, roles, and emotional excavation. She has long been drawn to characters that mirror her own complexities, women of quiet power and concealed pain. Urban's world, on the other hand, is rhythmic, spontaneous, filled with late nights, guitars, and stages humming with adrenaline. The convergence of those two worlds was thrilling in the beginning. Opposites often create sparks that burn bright, yet what ignites a romance can also, over time, become its undoing. The intensity that once attracted can later exhaust. The admiration for the other's differences can quietly transform into frustration at the distance they create. Those close to them have often remarked on how they navigated their differences with maturity. They spent much of their marriage splitting time between Nashville, Los Angeles, and Sydney, crafting a delicate choreography that allowed both to nurture careers and family. But as their daughters grew older, the anchors that once tied them to a shared domestic rhythm began to loosen. Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret started to develop independent lives, school, friends, travel, reducing the parental glue that had once bound their schedules and priorities. With children no longer requiring the constant vigilance of early parenthood, many couples are suddenly left facing each other again, rediscovering the space between them. It is in that rediscovery that many realize how far they have drifted. Kidman, in particular, had entered a creative renaissance in recent years, embracing roles that challenged her both psychologically and emotionally. Her work on television and film increasingly required her to embody vulnerability, sensuality, and risk, traits that sometimes blur the boundaries between performance and personal revelation. Urban, while supportive in interviews, seemed increasingly detached from that world. The contrast between their professions became more pronounced as they aged. Kidman's roles demanded emotional immersion, while Urban's stage life demanded charisma and connection with an audience. Both, in their own ways, required giving vast portions of themselves to strangers. When two people live such outward-facing lives, the reservoir of emotional intimacy at home can gradually deplete. Their friends often noted that the couple's private communication began to wane. Where once there were long, late-night calls between cities, there were now brief text exchanges. The romantic spontaneity that defined their early years, the handwritten notes, surprise visits, songs written for love gave way to practicality and schedules. Love, at its core, demands presence, not merely proximity. Emotional presence becomes harder to sustain when two people are perpetually consumed by external expectations. Even when they were together, the demands of preparation, rehearsals, press tours, and commitments left little room for stillness. It is in stillness that couples rediscover each other. Without it, the distance expands silently, invisibly. There is also the question of identity. Kidman, from the earliest stages of her life, has been defined by reinvention. She has always carried herself as both fragile and formidable, open-hearted yet fiercely private. Urban, meanwhile, spent years refining an image that balanced sensitivity and masculinity. His music often drew from the rawness of love, heartbreak, and self-discovery. When those themes began to feel uncomfortably close to his real life, the tension between art and authenticity likely deepened. In relationships where both partners are artists, the lines between personal experience and creative expression often blur. Every heartbreak becomes material. Every silence becomes story. That can be both cathartic and dangerous. It invites honesty, but it can also turn personal pain into public narrative. As their marriage matured, the dynamic between them shifted. Kidman's international success continued to soar with critically acclaimed projects, while Urban's musical trajectory, though steady, entered a more reflective phase. He toured, collaborated, and experimented, but the energy of his early years gave way to a quieter introspection. It is not uncommon for couples in this stage of life to find that their ambitions no longer align. When one partner continues to surge forward professionally while the other seeks grounding and home, an unspoken imbalance takes root. It is not about envy, but evolution. People grow, sometimes in parallel, sometimes apart. What makes a relationship last is the willingness to evolve together, and sometimes, even the most devoted couples discover they can no longer find that shared rhythm. Those who observe them privately describe the final years of their marriage as peaceful but detached. There were no public scandals, no violent ruptures. Theirs was a quiet unraveling, a gradual recognition that the deep love between them had transformed into something companionate, more familial than romantic. Divorce in such cases becomes not an act of destruction, but one of acknowledgement. It is the admission that love has changed shape, and the courage to let it evolve outside the constraints of marriage. For two people as proud and image-conscious as Kidman and Urban, that acknowledgement must have been excruciating. Another layer to their story lies in the tension between privacy and exposure. Kidman's first marriage to Tom Cruise had been one of the most scrutinized unions in Hollywood history. That experience shaped her approach to her second marriage. She guarded it fiercely, revealing only glimpses. Her restraint, however, may have also created barriers. Urban, by contrast, is emotionally demonstrative by nature. His love language is public affirmation through lyrics, interviews, and onstage dedications. When his enthusiasm waned in recent years, the silence became noticeable. What had once been expressed through songs and declarations faded into polite mentions. The lack of visible affection fed public curiosity and, perhaps, internal doubt. When love that was once proudly celebrated becomes discreet or understated, it often signals a deeper fatigue. The interplay between fame and marriage cannot be underestimated either. Fame amplifies both affection and fracture. It demands performance even in private life. Couples become symbols, and symbols must remain intact for the audience. That pressure, subtle, constant, creates an environment where problems cannot easily be spoken aloud. To acknowledge struggle becomes to threaten the brand. Many celebrity marriages survive precisely because they function as a partnership of image as much as emotion. When the image begins to crack, when the smiles on the red carpet no longer mask the silence at home, the illusion collapses. For Kidman and Urban, whose relationship had always been held up as an emblem of balance, the collapse feels almost archetypal, a cautionary tale about how even seemingly perfect love can fray under the invisible weight of expectation. Kidman's decision to file for divorce likely came after a long period of inner turmoil. For someone who has built a life around control, deliberation, and grace, the act of ending a marriage is not impulsive. She would have agonized over it, weighed every emotional and practical consequence. That deliberation is visible in the pre-filed parenting plan, in the absence of financial demands, in the precision of her legal language. There is a kind of dignity in that, an insistence that even endings can be handled with care. Urban's compliance with the filings suggests a similar acceptance, if not resignation. In a world accustomed to public feuds, their restraint feels almost radical. Emotionally, however, restraint does not equal peace. Kidman, by all accounts, has always been deeply romantic. Her interviews often reveal a yearning for connection that is almost old-fashioned. She once said she believed in forever, that love to her was a living thing. To face the failure of that belief must carry a profound grief. Urban, meanwhile, has spoken of love as a force that saved him from his own darkness. To lose the woman who represented that salvation may reopen wounds he thought long healed. Divorce, in such a context, is not merely an ending, it is a reckoning with the selves they were when they found each other. As their separate lives begin to take shape, the challenges of redefinition await. Kidman must now navigate public curiosity while protecting her daughters from the noise of speculation. The media's appetite for narratives of female resilience will likely cast her as the dignified survivor, the elegant phoenix rising from heartbreak. She will smile, attend premieres, and continue to act with that haunting composure that has always defined her. But behind that poise will lie a quieter struggle to rediscover who she is without the identity of wife, to find companionship without performance. For Urban, the path may be more turbulent. Musicians are storytellers of emotion, and heartbreak is both wound and inspiration. He will likely channel his grief into his art, composing songs that echo with longing and loss. Yet fame has a cruel way of turning genuine pain into spectacle. Every lyric, every gesture will be dissected for clues, his authenticity questioned even as he bleeds onto the page. Their daughters stand at a delicate threshold too, old enough to understand the implications of their parents' separation, young enough to still hope for reconciliation. The dissolution of a family changes a child's sense of stability forever. Yet, with parents as conscientious as Kidman and Urban, they are likely to be protected, even shielded from the more painful details. Still, children sense emotional weather. They feel the silences and absences, the subtle tension between people they love equally. For Sunday and Faith, the years ahead will be formative not just in adolescence, but in understanding love itself, how it endures and how it sometimes ends. The cultural fascination with their breakup speaks to something larger in the collective imagination. Society is both enthralled and comforted by the fall of perfect couples. It reassures us that even beauty, talent, and privilege cannot shield anyone from the frailties of the human heart. But beyond the spectacle lies a quieter truth. The end of their marriage is also a meditation on endurance, choice, and change. It reminds us that love is not a fixed state but a living entity that must adapt or fade. Sometimes, the most loving act two people can commit is to release each other. The aftermath of such separations often reveals character more than the marriage itself. How they handle the months ahead, the press, the custody arrangements, the inevitable rumors, will shape how history remembers them as a couple. There is dignity in endings done well. If their early gestures are any indication, they will seek to close this chapter with grace rather than bitterness. Both have lived through enough to understand that the public's curiosity fades, but the emotional residue of a broken marriage lingers privately. Healing, in their world, will not come from interviews or public gestures, but from quiet reflection, from time spent away from the gaze of cameras, perhaps in the stillness of home or the solitude of travel. For Kidman, the work may once again become her refuge. She has always processed emotion through her characters, using performance as catharsis. The coming years may see her producing or starring in projects that mirror themes of love lost, resilience, and reinvention. For Urban, music will serve a similar purpose. There is a long tradition of country musicians transforming heartbreak into melody, and he will likely find in this pain the creative spark that once defined his greatest hits. It is the paradox of the artist's life. Even pain becomes material. Even loss becomes art. The story of their marriage, when looked at from its full arc, is not one of failure, but of duration and depth. 19 years is a lifetime in modern relationships, doubly so in the volatile realm of celebrity. They built a family, survived addiction, nurtured each other's dreams, and created memories that will continue to shape who they are long after the legal papers are signed. The end of their marriage does not erase that history, it simply reframes it. Love, even when it ends, leaves behind echoes that continue to resonate. In time, the public's fascination will fade. Another story will replace theirs. Another celebrity couple will capture attention. Yet for Kidman and Urban, the effects of this transition will linger quietly in their private lives, in the way they speak to each other, the way they navigate shared holidays, graduations, and milestones for their daughters. Divorced couples who have loved deeply often find a new kind of friendship in the ashes, a gentler, quieter connection built not on passion but on respect and shared history. Perhaps that too will become their story in time. For now, though, they stand on opposite sides of a threshold, each facing an uncertain future. The years ahead will require courage, patience, and perhaps forgiveness of themselves and each other. The world will continue to project its interpretations onto them, but the truth of their experience belongs only to them. What began with a spark in a Los Angeles ballroom in 2005 has now completed its circle, closing not with scandal but with sorrowful maturity. There is something profoundly human in this trajectory. The love story of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, from its dazzling beginning to its tender end, mirrors the universal rhythm of relationships. Meeting, merging, growing, drifting, parting. Their journey reminds us that even those who seem to have everything, beauty, fame, success, love, must still navigate the frailty of human connection. Theirs was a marriage that held light and shadow, triumph and fragility, devotion and distance. And though its final chapter is written in sadness, it remains at its core a testament to the simple and enduring truth that love, however it ends, was once real, and that perhaps is enough. The silence that follows the collapse of a long marriage often feels louder than any argument ever could. For Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, that silence will take on a particular texture, an echo of shared years, homes, and routines now fractured by circumstance. There are mornings when one wakes and instinctively reaches for the space that once held another body. There are evenings when the absence of familiar footsteps or laughter becomes almost unbearable. It is in these mundane absences that the finality of separation truly sets in. For a couple who spent nearly 2 decades entwined, every small ritual, morning coffee, a glance across a dinner table, a phone call before bed, becomes a ghost of what was. In the months following the formal separation, they will both be forced to build new rhythms. For Kidman, that may mean returning to solitude with the same intensity she once brought to performance. She has always spoken about being comfortable alone, yet loneliness after a long partnership is different. It's not solitude by choice, but by circumstance. The challenge for someone like her is to reclaim independence without bitterness, to rediscover pleasure in her own company. It is a journey many undertake after divorce, but for her, every step will be watched, photographed, analyzed, and written about. Privacy, that most basic human need during grief, will be the hardest luxury to afford. Urban's healing will take a different shape. The touring musician's life is built around constant motion, but in the aftermath of heartbreak, the stage can become both sanctuary and torment. Performing songs that once spoke of love now tinged with loss can hollow a man out. Yet the same music that causes pain can also heal it. His songwriting, which has always drawn from raw emotion, will likely deepen, his lyrics shaded by reflection rather than celebration. He will find, as many artists do, that pain clarifies. It strips away illusion and demands authenticity. There will be new songs, quiet ones perhaps, less about glamour and more about the ache of remembering. As the legalities of divorce proceed, the emotional process will move at its own slower pace. Paperwork finalizes the separation of assets, but hearts resist the same efficiency. For Kidman and Urban, whose identities were entwined not only personally but publicly, detangling themselves will take more than signatures. Friends may choose sides, homes may be divided, and shared memories will linger in every room they once inhabited together. Even practicalities, who keeps the house in Nashville, the property in Australia, the art collected over the years, will carry emotional weight. Each decision is a small goodbye. The media's gaze, unrelenting as ever, will ensure that neither can truly retreat into anonymity. Every public appearance will be scrutinized for clues. Kidman's wardrobe, Urban's expressions, their proximity to potential new partners. But beyond the speculation, what will likely endure is empathy. The public, for all its appetite for gossip, has always felt a strange protectiveness toward Kidman. She embodies grace under pressure, a woman who endures heartbreak without spectacle. That same empathy may extend to Urban, whose vulnerability has long been part of his artistic persona. Together, even in separation, they may remind audiences that love's end need not be defined by scandal, but by humanity. Time will soften the sharp edges of grief. A year from now, perhaps they will meet at a family event or a daughter's performance, and the awkwardness of early separation will give way to familiarity. Co-parenting will demand patience, communication, and compromise. It may also, paradoxically, restore a measure of affection, not romantic but respectful, grounded in shared concern for their children. Divorced couples often rediscover a gentler form of love in their roles as parents, one unburdened by expectation. For Kidman and Urban, that evolution may become their quiet redemption. Meanwhile, the world around them will move on. Other stories will fill headlines. Other relationships will rise and fall under the public eye. Their divorce, once headline news, will fade into memory, leaving behind a narrative that feels less like tragedy and more like the closing of a novel whose final page had been inevitable. What remains is legacy, a record of love that, for nearly 20 years, illuminated 2 lives and inspired millions who saw in them a portrait of commitment against odds. In years to come, when both speak of each other in interviews, it will likely be with measured fondness. They will speak of gratitude for shared experiences, for the children they raised, for the love that once defined them. Such grace, when genuine, becomes the final act of closure. It is the ability to honor what was without denying what is. That capacity for dignity, perhaps more than anything else, will define how their story is remembered. And when the noise fades, when the photographers lose interest, what will remain are two individuals, no longer halves of a famous couple, but whole in their own right again. They will stand as reminders that love, even when it ends, leaves behind something enduring, the proof that two people once chose each other fully, bravely, and without reservation. The end of a marriage does not negate the years of laughter, the children born, the nights spent planning a shared future. Those things remain, woven into the private fabric of who they are. For all the grandeur of their fame, the story of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's divorce is, at its heart, an ordinary one, of love found, nurtured, and finally released. It is a story of human fragility, of courage, and of the quiet grace that follows when two people choose honesty over illusion. In the quiet spaces beyond the headlines, both will begin again, not as symbols of perfection, but as people who dared to love deeply, and when love could no longer thrive, dared to let it go. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Nicole and Keith's shocking divorce? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.